actually just won the best marketer on LinkedIn for the APAC region.
The next guest
which is
an entrepreneur that has been disrupting the lead generation industry through the world's largest.
Nathaniel Bibby is an entrepreneur disrupting the way businesses generate leads online.
Joined by marketing consultant Nathaniel Bibby of Bibby Consulting Group. Nathaniel actually just won the best marketer on LinkedIn for the APAC.
Social media marketing award last year was recognised by the industry as LinkedIn Marketer of the Year. His name's Nathaniel Bibby, and he joins us now. How are you doing? I'm good. How are you? I'm very well.
What's up, guys? Welcome to Monday Night Live. I'm excited. Today we're going to talk about storytelling, one of my favorite topics to talk about. So drop in the chat and say hello. I want to know who's here, who have we got on LinkedIn, who have we got on Facebook, and who is over on YouTube. This is episode 4 back for Monday Night Live 2025. And I'm stoked because we're talking about storytelling, which applies to every area of business. But content marketing specifically. And you'll notice that I share a lot of stories in my content. People always share with you, the experts that you follow and the blogs you read and the advice you get. It's all about how do you grab attention? What's the hook? And how do you, educate people? Very few people actually talk about the power of storytelling. So I'm really excited to share with you what I've learned over the years. Najma, I haven't spoken to you in a while. Welcome. Hello. Storm, what's happening? Oh, we've got a good session in store today. Jeff Gordon is having a late night up in Melbourne. I know it's getting on a bit there. Thanks for being here, mate. Emma, how are you? Good to see you here, guys, and good to see you participating in the chat. I am going to deliver as much value as humanly possible tonight about the power of storytelling. So everyone always talks about how to grab attention, and very few talk about how to build trust. Those are the two things that I think about when it comes to marketing: attention, and then how do you hold on to that attention by building trust? Because the problem is, if you don't build trust with that audience, when you get the attention, you constantly have to get new attention, which can get either very time consuming or very expensive. What you want to do is capture attention, then hold on to it. And that's how you build an audience. We got Gerald from the Philippines and Clint's over on Facebook watching me do my thing. Thanks for being here, buddy. So we've got attention and trust. Attention, we can talk about all day long. I want to focus on the trust aspect for this episode. And maybe you could let me know in the chat, how do you think people make buying decisions? Let's look at sales, for example. Do they base their buying decisions on emotion or logic, do you think? What do you think the answer might be? Drop in the chat. Let me see. I know there's about a 34-second delay or something. 30-odd seconds delay. But I want to know, when it comes to sales, do you think people make decisions based on emotion or logic? And I'm talking about B2B sales as well. What do you think people make decisions based on? Cookie, what's happening, mate? Thanks for being here. Everyone's getting a shout out today. Good to see so many people here on time. We got a few answers coming back. Yep. Okay, so it's actually, some people say that it's over 90%. I think a Harvard study was over 80% is emotion. So what people generally do is they make the decision based on emotion and then they back it up with logic. The reason for that is because the majority of our brain is subconscious, right? So that's actually what's in control. And then the logical bit that we like to think we're in control of really just backs up the emotional decisions. When you just, when you go to look at buying a car, for example, and something just doesn't feel right and you don't end up buying, even though it might look really good on paper, that's the emotional side of things. And if you buy into something emotionally, you'll find a way to back it up with logic. And I'm going to share with you some examples on how to do this in sales and also with content and storytelling today. It's very exciting. I mean, when it comes to things like emotion, you've got your beliefs, which, by the way, you can't use logic to change. Like if somebody's got a very strong belief about something, like, for example, LinkedIn doesn't work, it's full of salespeople, for example, it's very difficult for you to convince them if you're just going to argue with them and just say, No, it does work. This is all the reasons why, and these are all the examples. The only way for me to be able to shift that belief pattern is actually to tell them a story of how I might have originally thought that, and then this is what I discovered, and then they see themselves in the story, they can relate to it, and that's how you break limiting beliefs that people might have about buying. You'll notice that if you ever go to like a seminar with one of the best speakers in the world, let's say you went to Tony Robbins or Russell Brunson, they actually, throughout the seminar, will be knocking off false beliefs and objections that will stop you from buying. And you'll notice they do it through storytelling. So when it gets to the time of actually asking for your credit card, you haven't really got any objections left, and it's just a no-brainer for you to go ahead and do it. Here we go. Mixture of both. Yeah, it is a mixture of both. That's right, Michael, I should say. It is a mixture of both. So I want to tell you a story. It's interesting. I topped on here. I always get these technical fun things that happen, and I had a few slides to share with you, and they weren't showing up. So I'm just going to explain it to you. So pay attention. You might want to take some notes. So there was a guy that wanted to prove the power of storytelling. And what he did is he went to a bunch of thrift stores and bought 200 items. And he paid roughly just over $1 for each item. And they were just things like horses' heads and just little ornaments and just little knickknacks. And then he called up an author and he said, I'm doing a research study to see the power of storytelling. Would you write a story about this particular object? And he did that with 200 authors. So he had 200 authors, one for each object, and he got them to write a story about the item. And then he listed each item on eBay. And guess what happened? Do you think they sold for more money? You bet they did. So there was a horse's head that sold for, it was bought for 99 cents. Let me just check the numbers here. It sold for $62.95. So what a return on investment on just a simple ornament. The 200 items were $250 in total, and they sold for $8,000 just purely because they had a story attached to them. Okay, so why aren't we using this in our business? I mean, if a story gets people emotionally invested in something and therefore the value is worth more, then shouldn't we all be using storytelling? And so the question arises, what stories do we tell? So I start with neuroscience. Like there's so much advice out there when it comes to content marketing, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. And if you're anything like me, I can find it a little bit confusing, reading all the different suggestions. And so what I'm looking at is, what's the science? What does the science show? What does the research show? And I came across this, a couple of books, but I came across this neuroscience behind marketing and behind content marketing, which I found absolutely fascinating. And if you look at the brain chemicals that the brain develops, like dopamine, oxytocin, and what's the other one? Endorphins. Those are the three main ones when it comes to positive brain chemicals. When you experience those brain chemicals, and it might be because oxytocin's around when you're playing with your kids, or when a new child is born, or when you're with an intimate partner, and then you've got dopamine, which is when you're on the way to do something you really enjoy or having fun. Might even be having a couple of beers with the lads. That's dopamine. And then endorphins is when you're having a good laugh. You might be at the comedy or just having a laugh with a friend. Somebody said something funny. And those emotions, when they get triggered in your brain, they actually increase your empathy. You're more trusting. You're more caring. And you're more positive in general. Okay? So those could be really powerful brain chemicals to release in the people that we're dealing with, we're doing business with, right? Unfortunately, most people, when they're either consuming content or at work, are experiencing cortisol and adrenaline. Now, cortisol and adrenaline decreases empathy. People get less trusting. They do things based more on fear. And I'm just going to bring up the whole list here. They have a bad memory. They're critical. They make bad decisions. They're more stressed. They're irritable, intolerant, uncreative. I mean, this is not what we want people to be in, right? So when 90% of people is that storytelling or lying? I'm going to come back to that. Great question. So I'm going to come back to that question. It's a good one. Where was I? So the majority of people, when they're presenting to a prospect or doing a talk, they're actually putting them in a cortisol state with all the facts and figures and too much information. And people have got their guard up going, is this guy trying to sell me something? What's he trying to get out of me? And so if you're triggering that cortisol, I mean, it's not impossible to make the sale, but you're working against all of those, intolerable feelings that the person is getting. If you remember last time you were stressed, were you in a very positive state to make a good decision? Probably not. So what we want to do is transition people into a more resourceful state. Maybe that's the way we should call it. And what it's, I'm going to answer Gerald's, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong, Gerald's storytelling or lying. So what I'm talking about here is packaging up information in the way that it can be received by people. The human brain works how it works. So I didn't design it. And, when people have beliefs, they may not know that they're false beliefs or limiting beliefs. And so if you want to share them a new perspective, which will be of value to them, I mean, I'm assuming here that what you're offering and what you're selling or the value you're trying to provide is a positive one. Look, it's hard to sell something if you don't believe in it, So if you're selling something you don't believe in, I suggest, looking at an alternative option. But the way I look at sales is not trying to get somebody to buy something, not trying to sell something to someone. It's actually trying to help them buy. So I actually look at sales as service. So if you deliver a good service and you help that prospect make a better decision in quicker time, and the value you're providing is good, then that's a service. And a sale might not be the outcome. They may end up going down the street, because if truthfully that's where they should go based on what their requirements are, then that's what you should recommend. You're delivering a service. But the idea is that if you do that, and if you deliver a much service, a natural consequence will be sales. And this is how you sell with integrity. It's much more important to be honest than it is to make a sale, because you're building a relationship with somebody. So what we're talking about here is building a relationship with somebody, but also sharing with them some ideas, because there's nothing worse than when you try to explain something that will help them so much, but you just can't get it in their head. And it's just because of the way you're communicating it. And so we don't listen to people we don't like. Yeah, I know. And look, when you do start sharing stories, there are going to be people that don't agree with you, that don't resonate with you. And that's a good thing, because if you try to appeal to everyone, you end up appealing to no one. That's what Seth Godin said, legendary marketer. What you want to do is decide, what are your values? What are the beliefs of your audience? Who is your audience? And then you just want to communicate, who you are to them. And so when I started being a bit more authentic in content, it would have been 8 or 9 years ago. What happened was I hired a videographer, and we went to the top floor of my apartment building. It was a great outlook over the city, and it was a great place for filming. And he turned the camera on, and he just said, "Oh, look, tell me about how you started your business." And up until that point, because I started my business career very young, I was constantly trying to appear more professional, more polished than I, would have been naturally, just trying to fit in with people twice my age, really, in my 20s. And I decided just to be honest. I actually forgot that I was being filmed. And I shared this story where, when I started my business, I was broke. I had just quit my job. I was $20,000 in debt. When I was driving home after quitting my job, I saw the petrol light in the car start flashing. And I knew I would get home, but I didn't know how I was going to fill it up, after that. And I'd had an eviction notice already. So I was pretty close to getting evicted from my apartment. So I thought, it's time to call the parents. I called Dad. He couldn't help me. He was going through a lot of dramas on his own. And I called my mum, and she did something which I actually thanked her for many years later. And she said, "No, Nathaniel, you're old enough now. You got this." And she hung up the phone. And as the sun was going down, I went to turn on the lights, obviously, in the apartment. No lights came on. My electricity had been cut out. And that was probably quite a low point. Well, that was one of the lowest points for me that I can remember. So I found 2 extension cords in the cupboards and connected them together so they were long enough to run down the stairwell of my apartment building. And in the stairwell of my apartment building, there was a power socket, that was public use. So I plugged it one end in that power socket, and the other end I connected to a desk lamp, and I sat under that desk lamp and I wrote my business plan. Basically, it was an action plan of how I was going to get some money in, because it wasn't easy to get another sales job. And so the next day I hopped on the LinkedIn, I contacted a whole bunch of different business owners, and I came across a real estate agency that was in South Bank and got them to agree to meet with me that day. And I sold their agents a personal branding package. It was $2,500. They got a Facebook page, a LinkedIn profile, and a 1-page website. And I made $15,000 in my first day in business. And that's how I made the leap into starting my own business and working for myself. I was pretty much controlled by fear up until that. But when I had to, when it was desperate, that's when I took action. And I grew really fast. And it was the best thing I've ever done. So sometimes your worst day can be your best day. And so I actually shared that story on camera when this videographer came around maybe 7 or 8 years ago. And after the filming, I kind of forgot about it. And then he sent me a couple of the edits that he was really excited about the next day. And this video was one of them. And I sat on it for weeks. I wasn't sure if I was comfortable putting this online. And eventually I decided just to do it. And the response was huge. I mean, it wasn't, I'm not saying like it got millions and millions of views, but the amount of private messages and the amount of, the kind of comments, the deep relationship that sort of authenticity builds is absolutely phenomenal. Literally to the point where 2 years later, I was going through the airport and a security guard at the airport said, "Hey, Nathaniel, I watched that video when you talked about how you started your business. Good on you." That's a true story. And it's not lying. It's actually being authentic and being vulnerable. Now, me sharing that story, what I've learned since is it actually builds trust with my audience, because I'm giving them permission to be authentic and vulnerable with me because I've done the same thing first. So that's one of the stories that I think every person in sales or business should have. And that's the origin story. It's one of many that you should have. We all have stories. We're all born storytellers. A lot of us don't think that our stories are worth hearing, and it's just not true. The way that you can work that out, it's not like I magically became a storyteller. Right? When I saw the power of this, I thought, okay, what other stories can I apply to what I'm, to what I'm doing with clients and what I'm doing in business? And what you find is as you start writing them down, you've actually got lots of stories. And the more you tell them, the easier they are, that you work out which bits do well. And it's just great for content because you can keep, doing them over again and you get better and better. And so some of the other stories that I recommend that you guys should do is the Epiphany Bridge story. So I'm just having a look in the chat here. Logic would tell you not to get married. Yeah. I better shut my mouth on this one. You never know who's tuning in. Belief is based on emotion. Trust is an emotion. That's true. So the Epiphany Bridge story, came across this in Russell Brunson's book, the founder of ClickFunnels. And I'm not saying that I'm not like a diehard Russell Brunson fan, but this particular concept I found extremely valuable. And so what an Epiphany Bridge story is you think about what are the main objections that people have or the main limiting beliefs they have when you're dealing with them in sales or in an audience. If you're doing one-to-many, this works just as well as with content. And you think about, instead of going, like if somebody says, somebody believes that LinkedIn's full of salespeople, maybe they've been on there before and all they see is these sales pitches and they've tried doing some outreach, they've tried doing some content and they just haven't got any results. So they say LinkedIn doesn't work, partly because it's easier than saying I messed up. People don't like to admit that they made a poor decision. Why? Because of their status. So status affects all of us, some of us more than others. And it's important to understand this in psychology. We don't really like to admit it, but it's true. And so people have a bias towards admitting that they didn't do something right, which is it's difficult, because the way to get better is to fail faster. And so if you turn away from things every time you mess up, you're actually not going to develop the skills. So it's not LinkedIn, right? It's the way that you were using it. And so all I have to do to address that belief is, when I first hopped on LinkedIn, I used to do posts and content, and I just wait for people to come and view the content, and no one was interested. I'd send out messages and I got no responses. And then one day I came across a book with Tony Robbins says the way to be successful in marketing is to add more value than anyone else. And that's when it clicked for me, and I realized that content and social media wasn't a place just to sell your stuff. It's actually more like a birthday party. It's a place to build relationships. And so I stopped pitching in my posts, and I stopped pitching in my messages, and I focused on building relationships and adding value. And that's when everything transformed for me. So he's listening to this and he's going, oh, wow, if it transformed for Nathaniel, is there any reason why it couldn't transform for me? And that's the epiphany bridge, like where you came up with the epiphany. And, we all didn't just wake up and be great LinkedIn marketers. At some point, you figured out, something about what you do. And so you were a beginner as well once. And what you want to do is share, that story from being there to where you are now. And that's the epiphany bridge story. But make sure you address, how you were feeling. And I kind of went over it pretty quickly then, because, conscious of time. But if you write down the 3 biggest objections that you get with your customers, and then think of what stories that you have that are true from your life that address those beliefs, 3 stories, and then start producing them in content with your videos, and then you'll get better and better at them. These will be really important. Think about it. When people are consuming them, first of all, you can break their limiting beliefs. Second of all, you drive emotion. They've got more empathy when they listen to the story. All of those positive brain chemicals come into play. They're more trusting, more caring, and then they start to associate you with those feelings, rather than just like giving them facts and figures and this is how you do it. It almost sounds like, when you're starting out, it almost sounds like condescending, like people are like overwhelming you with information. No, this is how you do it. I know best. No, I know best. If you want to stand out, share a story. And you can use ChatGPT or AI to help you put these into words, but be very careful about making sure that it's your story and editing it at the end as well, so it's coming from your words. I think that's very important. But I do use AI to help save me time. Sometimes when I'm writing a story, it would take me like 2 hours if I did it on my own. AI can get it down to like 45 minutes, 30 minutes. So that's very worthwhile. And I really want to show you this video. Let me just see if I can play it. There's a little clip I'm going to play you from my event called Storytelling for Business, which is a live event. I'm talking for a little bit, and then I'm going to play a video which shows you the power of oxytocin.
We're going to move on to how to create stories and how they benefit people in making buying decisions. I'm a marketer. I think of marketing like a customer journey. So you've got awareness, consideration, decision, purchase, advocacy. That's the way I think about marketing. And so let's have a look at where storytelling fits into the customer journey.
Kevin, I take you
to be my husband.
To be my husband.
From this time onward.
From this time onward.
To join with you.
To join with you.
And to share.
And to share.
All that is to come.
All that is to come.
To give and to receive.
To give and to receive.
To speak and to listen.
To speak and to listen.
To inspire and to respond. Are you speaking or listening?
Okay, I'll stop it there. I don't know if you've ever come across these videos before where a couple are getting married and they're at the altar and one of them just starts giggling uncontrollably. That's when you're getting flooded by a lot of oxytocin and endorphins because she's so happy that she can't control her laughter. Like something triggered it and she just can't stop because of the brain chemicals that are flooding through her system. So we can do the same thing through content marketing. You've got oxytocin, endorphins, they're pretty self-explanatory. And then the dopamine, how do you think you create dopamine in somebody's brain? Anticipation, curiosity, right? Tell them what you're going to do next, but don't tell them right away. That's how you do it in your content. What do you think these hooks are doing? That they're creating curiosity. You know, if I tell you these are the 3 big mistakes to avoid when it comes to LinkedIn, it's building curiosity and anticipation, which makes people want to read more. Because when people are on social media, they're spending about 1 minute and 14 seconds on average on LinkedIn. But during that time, they're looking at 14 posts on average, just over a minute, 14 posts. So you've got to really capture people's attention if you want them to pay attention to your post for, well, you need them to pay attention for a minute to read it, right? So you do have to grab attention, but then what I want you to do is follow through with building the trust by actually delivering on what you say you're going to deliver. Another way you can build anticipation is by starting a story. You know, one of the best posts I've ever done, the hook was, I remember the day I up and left. And it goes into the story about my origin story about quitting my job. But it starts with, I remember the day I up and left, and, you know, raised all these questions like, you know, what day and so on and so on. But I've started the story. So that's one way to do it. Another way is to tell them what to expect when you're doing the hook. And I will just, a giggle loop. That's right. That's what it's called. Absolutely. So another thing that I want to draw your attention to is, let's look at the movie industry. Okay, product placement is about a $15 billion industry at least. I mean, I think that statistic's a few years old. So, you know, somebody goes to watch a James Bond film. Okay, and it's so unrealistic. He's got, you know, the cars, the women, he's an action hero, he's jumping out of airplanes. But people watch the movie and they love it. And they think, geez, this James Bond guy, he's a cool dude. I should be more like James Bond. And then, you know, and the next afternoon they're walking through town and there they see it. It's a watch shop. And just in the window is this Omega watch that looks exactly like the one James Bond wore. And they'll go in and they'll spend $15,000 buying this watch. And then they'll walk out of the store feeling more like James Bond, right? Why do you think all these companies are spending so much money to place products in movies and pay influencers to use the products? It's because of this very, very reason. And so this is storytelling at its best. This proves the concept, the amount of money being spent on, you know, product placement. But also you want to think about, how do you prime your customers to buy your stuff? Because they are motivated, whether you like it or not, by status. And so how can you increase somebody's status with your product or service? It's like, you know, with pricing, you know, some people will pay $20 when they go to a pub for a pint, right? But they won't pay, you know, $3 at the local fish and chip shop. Why? It's just the environment. It's just to do with the indoctrination is the word, indoctrination. So if you prime people right with the storytelling, you can charge what you want, you know. And so that's something I want you to think about. The third story, I will just bring up Michael's comment here. Okay, let's read this. Great stuff, Nathaniel. I had similar experience with Facebook that you had with LinkedIn. I realized I was flooding my brain with the wrong messages, but it wasn't a platform's fault. Yeah, fantastic, mate. Okay, well, thanks for being here, Michael. That's really a good value add. You've got to be a gatekeeper of what you let into your mind and let into your space. Control what you consume. Control the content you see. I mean, if you're a business owner, what I would suggest doing is stop being a consumer of content. Use it it for research, yes, and use it to network and use it to build relationships, but focus on being a creator of content. So rather than sitting in the sidelines at the football pitch, get on the field, and start creating content, start throwing things out there, start sharing your vulnerable story and see how that lands. The third story I want to, let's have a look here. The third story I've got here is how you discovered your product or service. So one of the things people like to do when business is, well, at all times, whether business is struggling or business is going well, is they like to create new products and services. So what I want you to think about, if you do have a new product or new service or a new event or something new that you're offering, think about the narrative behind how you came up with this product or service and why it's necessary, so that you actually stand out from everyone else that's offering that stuff. So when I started offering LinkedIn marketing services, people would assume, if I didn't share my story, that I'm just selling LinkedIn and that's all I sell, and I'm just selling it because that's my job. If I explain that I was in digital marketing before that, and I was doing radio ads, pay-per-click, SEO, Facebook ads, email marketing, what else? What am I forgetting? Remarketing. Yeah, we did everything. Banner ads, everything you could think of when it comes to online marketing. I was doing it for myself and for clients as a digital marketing strategist. And then when I started generating appointments through LinkedIn, I stumbled across it because I wanted to target cosmetic surgeons and dentists. And I tried knocking on their doors and I couldn't get past the practice manager. I tried cold calling them. Again, I couldn't get past the practice manager and speak to the decision maker. And I just joined LinkedIn, and there was a picture of me in a nightclub like this, because I used the same photograph that I had on Facebook. And I thought, I wonder if they're on this LinkedIn thing. And so I did a search for surgeons in Melbourne, and sure enough, some came up. And then keep in mind, medical practices, that these guys aren't sitting around on the computer all day. So it's, not going to be the most effective industry, but it worked. So I contacted 10 of them. I had 6 responses, had 4 meetings, and I made 1 sale. But because it was the ideal target market, the sale was large. It was about 5 times the size of, an average sale. At the time, it was like 25 grand. And all I said was, hey, I specialize in online marketing for medical practices. I wouldn't mind having a chat to see if I can add value to what you're doing. Very simple. And then the next week, instead of sending 10 messages out, I sent out 20. And before long, I'd hired an assistant to do all the messaging for me. And I did 8 to 10 appointments a day with medical practices. And I became the go-to expert in the medical world for online marketing, because I had so many connections in that area, which I built through LinkedIn, and everyone else couldn't get past the practice manager with cold calling or door knocking. So I became the expert in that area. But I just thought to myself, geez, we're doing this SEO, we're doing AdWords, we're doing websites, we're doing Facebook, but this LinkedIn thing, which I'm doing for myself, but I'm not offering to anyone else, is the most effective form of B2B lead generation that I've ever come across in my 25 years in marketing. And I thought, if I can delegate it to an assistant, businesses can delegate it to me. And that's when I started Australia's first LinkedIn marketing agency. It had never been done before. We created all the systems because it was the most effective thing that I was using, which I couldn't offer to clients. Like medical practices, it wasn't going to work on LinkedIn. So I said goodbye to all the medical practices and stopped working with them, and said goodbye to quite a decent revenue stream. And I approached B2B companies and I said, I've got something for you. And that's my story. And so when people hear that, then they realize, oh, Nathaniel's not doing this just because, he wants to sell us something. He's doing it because he believes in this. And that's what I want you to think about for your products or services. Gerald, yes, we are a creator or a consumer. I mean, you've got to listen to what people are saying, but get on the pitch. Don't be afraid to post. What most of you are doing is you're letting perfection get in the way of good enough. Just throw stuff out there. You probably notice a lot of stuff I post will have, the odd spelling mistake and it's not perfect, but that's just because I'm chasing volume. I'd love it to be perfect, but it's just not possible if you're going to be posting every day. I've got a business to run. And then sometimes I'll notice later and I'll edit it and fix up the spelling. Sometimes I get extra comments from the spelling Nazis. But those are some of the things that I want you to think about when it comes to storytelling. We don't really have enough time to go into the actual tactics of how you craft a story, what are the key elements of a story and things like that. But I wanted to give you a bit of a taste of the neuroscience behind marketing and behind social media. So next time you're in the feed on LinkedIn or Facebook, or you're watching stuff on YouTube, just look at it critically and think to yourself, you know, what storytelling techniques are they using? What brain chemicals am I releasing? You'll notice that like some of the big boys, the big ads that you see on TV, they invest a lot in getting this right. What we're talking about here is human psychology. Okay, I can give you all the tactics and strategies for grabbing attention, but look, if you don't hold on to it, it's just not going to. It's not going to grow your audience. It's not going to grow your business. You're going to have to keep chasing new attention, which is hard work. You want to hold on to it. And that's part of the reason why I'm able to take 2 or 3 years off from things like Monday Night Live and not really post that much and then come back, is because, you know, clients that I have worked with, whether they're active or not, I've got quite a strong relationship with them and we've built that trust. So I don't have a problem, you know, keeping the income coming in while I'm not posting. But that's all changing this year, and we're firing things up. I've got like 3 or 4 times the activity on LinkedIn in the first couple of months of this year, so I'm looking at driving that even further. By the way, guys, I've just hired a video editing team. I'm going big into video, as you know, this year. For myself and my clients, we're getting about 15,000% more views than we were last year. If you'd like to know more about how to go viral with LinkedIn video, shoot me a DM on LinkedIn. I'll send you a video or a blog to read, because it's a huge opportunity at the moment. And the editing that we're doing is phenomenal. And because we're batch creating content and we're doing it in-house, it's very cost effective as well. So thanks for being here, Jeff. And I know it's late there, so I'm going to let you get on to bed, and I'm going to go have a beer with my daughter, who's been at the hospital all day. So thanks for being here, guys. Have a great week in business. Next week, we're covering Q&A. So it's your opportunity to be on Monday Night Live. If you want to come on and ask a question, you'll be on video. If you're happy to be on camera and ask a question, we've already got a few people that want to do it. Can't have everyone on, but if you want to be a part of that, please shoot me a message on LinkedIn and we'll see if we can fit you in. Thanks for being here, guys. I'll see you next week on Monday Night Live. Good night.